We are talking about Ìwà Pẹ, right? And focusing on the aspects of Ìwà Pẹ from the perspective of it being very vital to our spiritual health, our spiritual development, even more so than all of the ritual work and the things that we do in the tradition to bring about balance. So, welcome again. Thank you all for joining. I got a few comments. You saying you're grateful for this topic on your birthday. Ashe, Ashe. So, happy birthday. Alafia, Alafia, welcome. Hidden Beauty, thank you for joining. Alafia, Alafia, aside you, thank you as always for joining us. And thanks to everybody who is joining us from whatever other platforms that you're on. Definitely Instagram. I see you guys coming in, and I want to welcome you as well. So, greetings to everybody who is saying hello and coming in. So, as always, guys, if you're watching it live, make sure that you put any questions or reflections or what have you in the chat window based on this particular topic. I'm going to try my best to stay on point today. Sometimes I slightly get off depending on the nature of the questions that you guys have, but for the most part, I want to stick to it. And if you are watching the replay, guys, let me know what stood out to you the most and in the comment section, and we'll get to that as well. So we're going to jump right into the foundations of what Ìwà Pẹ means, and then we'll go through it and talk about some specifics and definitely answer a lot of the questions all of the questions that you guys asked beforehand. So when it comes to Ìwà, the word Ìwà in Yoruba just basically means character or behavior in general. So that word in and of itself, Ìwà, is very much so neutral. Now, when we're talking about Ìwà Pẹ, that means gentle or balanced character. And you got the diatrics there, so it's kind of mixed up, but you can see it on the screen. Ìwà Pẹ is basically what a lot of people translate to gentle character, but it's really like balance. It's about kind of being in that in between space. You're not too far to the right, not too far to the left. You are in balance, ideally, right? So everybody has Ìwà because that's just your character, but not everybody walks or operates within Ìwà Pẹ on a regular basis. All right. And even with that being said, Ìwà Pẹ is balanced. So you could be balanced in one area, but not be balanced in another area. Pretty well balanced. And that happens to all of us. Nobody's going to be perfectly 100% balanced all the time, because otherwise you wouldn't really need to be here, right? Because our whole walk, our whole journey on this earth is about learning those lessons so that we can achieve balance. But you want to stick as close as possible to it. It's not like well, I can't maintain perfection type of thing, so I'm just going to do whatever I want to anyway. That's not how it goes either. All right. So I got the question, is Ìwà Pẹ the same as good character? And it is not, right? So Ìwà Pẹ, as I said before, that is balanced character, oftentimes translated as gentle character. But when we're talking about good character, is Ìwà Riri. I might be pronouncing it wrong, but it's a different word in the Yoruba language, right? And this concept is basically subjected to cultural norms, right? The word good, that's very subjective, and it's really going to be based on what society is saying is right or wrong at that time. It's not necessarily based specifically on the principles of the Odu, though obviously you will have a whole lot of coordination there, but it's not always going to be the exact same thing, because society could consider something to be good in general, and it may not actually be good for you, even though it seems very much so benign, because it could be against your own taboos and what you were meant to do, right? You even, like, let's say you want to pick up a profession and you want to go and be like a medical professional, like a doctor or a nurse or something like that, because you want to help people genuinely. But it actually could be against your destined path. It might be taboo for you to go into that field of work. And so society would be like, that's a noble profession, but it may not be for you. So we distinguish it from that particular notion. You can kind of think about it like from the perspective of like Christianity, if you come from that background, when it comes to the notion of almsgiving and charity. Though they sit along the same line, they're not the exact same thing. Like almsgiving is from a very spiritual perspective based on, the biblical mandates that you are supposed to give, but it's strategic, it's intentional giving. It's not just, walking down the street and you see a homeless person and you just give them money. It's not that that's wrong, or it's not that that's not considered almsgiving. However, almsgiving is about proper reciprocity, and you are doing it in a way that's going to uplift the person and things like that. So, you could give to somebody and that person uses that in a way that is actually detrimental for them, right? You give them a homeless person some money, for instance, and they take their money, they use it to buy drugs or alcohol, they're spiraling back into that same condition again. And of course, there are situations where you can give a homeless person money and they could utilize that to strengthen themselves and actually go to the next level, depending on the circumstances surrounding that, right? But charity is like just giving, being kind, being nice. And that can be done on so many levels as well. It can be very strategic from a societal perspective when we're talking about like these large charitable organizations. But you can also be charitable by giving people things and doing things for people without it being from a religious context. So that's kind of the distinguishing factors there between what we refer to as balanced character, Ìwà Pẹ, that is something that is very much so within the confines of the Ifa tradition, right? The Yoruba traditional culture, whereas good character, again, like I said before, is about being just a good person all around, and it is from a social perspective or what have you. So, yes. Yes. Okay, thank you all. Thank you. Appreciate you guys. Let's see, let me take a few questions or comments rather. Said very well. Thank you. Greetings to all. Greetings to you, my dear. Greetings to everybody. Likewise, showing up on IG and every platform that you are joining us from. Okay. Now, let's see. So, Ìwà Pẹ is more so about aligning with your destiny. Everything in Ifa is about your destiny. You want to keep that in mind because a lot of times people want to come to Ifa or any traditional religion within African culture and look at it from a Christian or an Islamic perspective, like all of the laws and everything applies blanketly to everyone, and that is not true. Definitely, there are universal principles that are going to apply to us, like being in balance and things like that. But balance can look different from person to person, as I said before, especially when we're talking about things like taboos. Ashe, thank you, Hidden Beauty. I see you. Okay, so that's kind of the distinguishing factor there. I got a question from you guys about whether Ìwà Pẹ is different from being a nice person. So being a nice person doesn't not necessarily mean that you are automatically in Ìwà Pẹ. You could actually be out of Ìwà Pẹ, and I'm going to get to that shortly, right? So being nice is surface level, right? Is based, and it can be very much so circumstantial. You could be too nice, too kind, right? And you can also be inauthentically kind, and that can actually be violating the principles of Ìwà Pẹ for you, right? Because some people actually have taboos related to them not allowing people to take advantage of them, not being too nice, not being too giving, and things like that. And so, if that is applicable to you and you are operating in that space where you're being overly kind or overly generous, you are actually in violation of your taboos and you're not in balance at that point. And then obviously any type of inauthenticity um, is going to put you out of alignment with anything that's balanced. So that's not going to be it either, right? And you can absolutely, even when you should be operating in a space of being nice to other people. You can still operate from a space of ego, fear, manipulation, things like that, right? Because a lot of people are nice when it comes to the workplace or what have you. They're trying to be nice to their boss. They're fake nice or what have you, or nice people around them so that they can get things from them to manipulate them. Sometimes people are nice again because of fear. They don't want to lose their job or they don't want to lose a relationship, so forth and so on. So you have to kind of put the brakes on it right there when we're talking about the subjective aspects of character and things like that. Okay. You Pele this about what's going on in within you, internal discipline, being spiritually mature, understanding, again, your taboos. And when I say taboos, let me qualify that, because you get your permanent taboos when you get initiated. That doesn't mean that you cannot know some of your taboos, especially the ones that are applicable to you at the moment or for an extended time frame before you get initiated. Because even after you get initiated, you can get a reading and certain taboos can come up for you for the moment, like you shouldn't be involved in this or that are not part of your permanent taboos or warnings and things like that. So you can get some of that information out. If you know your head or reach a lot of that, you will, I won't say a lot, but some of that you'll know also, like certain things that are taboo to a head or reach. For instance, Obatala being one, like Obatala is famously or infamously known for not drinking alcohol, not getting drunk and things like that, palm wine, etc. So his children are encouraged to stay away from. Sometimes it is taboo actually for them to drink palm wine no matter what, but some of them will have a higher degree of challenges when they consume alcohol than others will at certain times in their experience. So you want to be very careful with that. Okay. Another question you guys asked about Iwa Pele and like lineage, ancestors, things like that. All right. Well, no, this isn't the specs. Is it the same across all lineages of Ifa? Meaning, like the Isheshe, the Lukumi, the Santeria, Palo, all of those derivatives that we work with in the tradition across the diaspora. And so, absolutely, the core of Iwa Pele is going to be the same, because Iwa Pele, the principles come from the Odu Ifa, right? And so that's going to be the same. Obviously, there are variations in how the Odu Ifa is interpreted, and there are discrepancies when it comes to the focal points of different aspects of the Odu Ifa, depending on the house or what have you. All right. So that means that you are going to have different houses that will emphasize specific practices or behaviors or expressions of Iwa Pele more than other houses, especially if it's something that they struggle with within that familiar line, because that's ultimately where a house comes from, is a family line. All right. So now I want to look at some basic tenets of Iwa Pele. Basically, where does it come from? The foundation of it, which I said before, is the Odu Ifa. I'm going to give this, disclaimer right now. I'm going to go through kind of a really brief summary over each of the major Odu and kind of what we can extract from there as far as the foundational tenet of Iwa Pele that applies to that particular Odu. The Odu is so vast as we will be here for all day, all week, month, even so. If I went through every aspect of it, it's not even possible. And even so, again, the Odu is going to apply to you at a particular moment when you get a reading. So you could get a reading, you could get the same Odu as another person. However, your taboos or your warnings that come out of that Odu at the same time that another person gets that Odu could be very, very different. So you want to be mindful of that as well. Okay. So, like when it comes to the notion of coming into the earth, part of Ìwà Pẹ, a huge part of Ìwà Pẹ, is adhering to your destined calling. That's so important because, as I said before, balanced character is very heavily dependent on your individual destiny. Now, obviously, you're going to operate with in honesty and integrity. Maintaining your taboos is so important for you. And again, going back to that notion, something could be very much so benign, seem benign in the world, but it could actually be detrimental for you. For instance, you may have a taboo to not eat a certain food, for instance, okra. And, the world says, oh, it's okay, right? Okra is a plant, it has medicinal properties, it's very good for you, especially depending on the way it's cooked, so forth and so on. And it could seem okay, but one person could actually eat some okra and suffer from severe food poisoning and even soul transition because of it, because because consuming okra either at that time or even so from a permanent perspective could have been taboo for them. They weren't supposed to consume it. So this is why I harp so much on that notion of especially of personal taboos, because it's very important that you follow those. All right. So we also talking about, and I'm giving the Odu names in parentheses. I'm not gonna try to pronounce all of them. I know how to pronounce a lot of them, but I just don't feel like messing up a lot today because I already know Mercury's in retrograde and that impacts our communication dynamics. So, but if you want to look these up in more depth, definitely, utilize that as a reference point. Being patient, and humble are so very, very paramount, especially not just all the time, but as far as you can, but also especially in times of transition when you're going through chaotic changes and uncertainty. Being patient, not rushing into things. Patience is like one of the most important principles. It is the most important principle because your destiny is all about kind of wait and see what's going on. You can have the insight and the information when you get you for divination for sure, but it still has to play out in its own time. That's why patience is so important because a lot of times people do get Ifa readings and they get this really beautiful, exciting news and like this is going to happen for you. And it's great to be excited about it, but sometimes people get overly anxious because they hear this and it's like, I want it to happen right now. And sometimes they will do things to try to compel it to come into existence. And there are things that you can do to force things to happen. It's not good. It again is not operating within balanced character because you really want it to come when it is appropriate for you. Because if it comes before time, you're going to have challenges in the area, right? So, during times of uncertainty, chaos, transition, exercising patience, exercising humility, seeking truth, being reflective, right? Introspective. That is part of having balanced character. Taking a good deep look at yourself, at your past behavior, at who you are, looking at yourself in the proverbial mirror, so to speak. All right. Allowing information to surface as it needs to through that aspect of you. So, yes, definitely being contemplative about yourself and who you are and where you've been and what you've done. That's part of balanced character because through that notion you get an opportunity to know yourself much better. Okay. Adhering to sacred boundaries with patience and restraint when you're facing obstacles. So herein is the notion of obviously taboos when we're talking about sacred boundaries that are personal to you, taboos personal to you, but also taboos that are incremental to the community, to your family line, to society at large, right? So that means when you're going through things, don't just go and do anything to get it done or to make your way. You want to go through the proper steps of Ifa when you're having struggles, because in some cases, obviously, struggles are through curses and attacks and things like that. But sometimes you go through struggles because they're meant to strengthen you. Even those are still meant to strengthen you. Honoring your your ancestral lineage and fulfilling your inherited duties and potential. This is so important, especially in today's world for the diaspora, in my opinion, because there's so many people who are not doing that because we've been told that our ancestors are demonic. And, if you mention to the average person in Christianity or other Abrahamic religions that don't believe in connecting with your ancestors in the way that we do, they will all the time say that's evil, that's wrong. And so a lot of people throughout the African diaspora are very much so disconnected from their ancestral lineage, and this is why we are experiencing so many challenges as a collective. But that is absolutely part of Iwa Pele, because you came from a specific lineage for a specific purpose. Okay, you inherited certain gifts, certain knowledge, certain strengths, certain challenges that you are meant to go through in order to strengthen yourself and your bloodline and to fulfill your destiny. Your whole entire purpose is linked to your destiny, even though you have to your divine purpose, even though you have your own individual destiny to fulfill, it is still linked to your lineage. That's why you came through the people that you came through, right? Even if it was difficult or chaotic, dysfunctional. I know a lot of us came through that. You might be like, well, what is the purpose of this? Well, you came to learn certain lessons. You came to get certain information, even so through those people, so that you could fulfill your destiny. There were so many lessons that you learned growing up, even if you had some of the most turbulent or difficult situations, even if you weren't even like raised around your family, like you were adopted or something like that. There are still lessons that you were meant to learn within that situation that you're supposed to carry forward in order to heal yourself and also to heal your bloodline. All right. Navigating unexpected changes and circumstances with being adaptable and resilient. So we talked about the patience aspect. You also have to be adaptable when you're going through changes. That's part of having balanced characters, not to just fold and be like, well, you know what, I'm, immovable. I'm not going to change. This is the way it is. And, I'm not going to do what I need to do to adapt and make sure that this situation works in out for me in the way it's supposed to work, because there are some things that may need to change in your life, in your circumstances. And you just hold on to the old way of being because you don't want to change. Another aspect of this is employing integrity, being accountable in your words. Such a very important part of balanced character is the way we speak and the way we communicate. When I say speak, I'm not just talking about verbally, right? In every aspect of the way we communicate, even the way we write, even those of y'all on social media who feel like you can say whatever to anybody and it doesn't count. No, all of it counts. So even when you want to get behind the keyboard and get into your little wars with that, that counts, as well as words that you say to people behind people's back, gossiping, all that kind of stuff, betraying people. All of that matters because your words are so important. Even the words that you say to yourself and about yourself, the way you speak. If you constantly saying negative words, you're out of balance. If you're constantly saying, negative words about yourself, right, you're out of balance in that regard. So you have to be mindful of those dynamics as well. Endurance is so very important. Going through conflict, right? Staying disciplined, controlling yourself, not compromising yourself whenever you're going through different things. Also, not retreating, right? Not retreating in the face of battles and like, I just give up. I'm not gonna move forward. Staying the course, being courageous, being persistent whenever you're going through. And if you notice, a lot of these things are about, right, going through challenges and facing difficulties, because that's the time that we need the most balance. There are also times, obviously, when we're facing good things, which I'm going to get to as well, where balance is critical. But a lot of times when we're dealing with the struggles and the challenges, that's when, we want to get upset, we want to fight, we want to get angry, we want to even sometimes do things to compel things to go our way, etc. So you want to be in balance then. Navigating hidden forces and unseen influences with spiritual discipline and vigilance. Understanding that everything is not what you see at face value. So you got to be able to navigate the things that are going on behind the scenes, things that you cannot always see. You have to be able to navigate that properly and remain disciplined and vigilant when you're going through those things. Not misusing your power. So hearing this is one of those times where you have the good things, you have the power or what have you, but you want to avoid being in a space of arrogance and pride and being reckless with the power, with the things that you have, because you do have the ability to um, impact change from a negative perspective when you have good things at your disposal, right? So manager or supervisor or what have you, still want to treat people well. You want to treat people fairly. Obviously, if you're in a political position, or it could even so be in a domestic situation. Right before I got on, I was strolling through Instagram and saw a video of this family in, forget where it was, but it was a Kenyan lady anyway. She was being beat by her employer for asking for her check, and they were being very, very rude and mean to her. And I was just like, it speaks to this dynamic that I was just getting ready to come online with and talk about, abusing. They were just totally abusing their power. They were in a position of wealth that they could hire her, and they should have been paying her, and she was 2 months rather delayed in receiving her pay. And when she asked for it, they beat her, so she was recording it. So I guess to present it as evidence or what have you. And you're not supposed to operate in that either, right? Because there are situations where you absolutely have it at your disposal to help other people, and you should not abuse that power. Managing blessings and abundance with humility, recognizing that prosperity requires wisdom and responsibility. This is important as well, right? So when you get money, you get something, of value, you get abundance. That's not that you just take it and be wasteful. You have to be a good steward, so to speak, of whatever you have. You need to make those resources last. You want to also make it last for the next generation over, if possible, depending on the amount, of course. So all of those dynamics are important as well when it comes to balanced character. You want to seek divine counsel, right? Guidance, so that you can have discernment and wisdom in life. That's part of balanced character. Don't just depend on your own understanding and your own knowledge base, thinking that you know it all, because that's egotistical. You want to go and get counsel from elders. You obviously want to get divine counsel from Ifa, because we practice a tradition that believes in divinatory insight. So, all of those notions are very important as well. Being generous and practicing reciprocity in your relationship. And again, in a balanced state, right? Not over giving, but we do still want to be generous, but it needs to be within bounds. you need reciprocal relationships. That doesn't mean, one for one. Every time you do something for somebody, they must do the exact same thing for you. But there needs to be reciprocity in relationships. All right. And this goes for both ends, whether you are the person that's always receiving or you're the person that's always giving. It needs to be in balance. It should never be that one is always receiving in a situation and one is always giving, because it creates imbalance either way it goes. Okay. Exercising kindness. You do want to be kind. You do want to be nurturing in your relationships to invite divine favor. If you're always constantly arguing or bickering or fighting with someone, then that is a sign of imbalance, and you want to get back in balance because you don't want to have these challenges in life that cause you to miss the mark, so to speak. And then, lastly, living in truth, moral integrity, and as you fulfill your destiny holistically, right? You want to operate in purity. These are holistically from the Odu, a general guide, as I said before. So this is not to be taken as like, this is all I have to do. No, it depends on your particular situation, but it gives you an overview of what is considered to be balanced within the Odu Ifa. So now we're going to look at, how this applies to our Ori and our destined calling. So Iwa Pele is the expression of your Ori in the physical world, right? So your Ori chose your destiny. When it comes to balanced character, that is how you honor that choice. You come into this earth, you make the decision to operate in a space of balance, the middle ground for whatever you are meant to accomplish in your particular destiny. Whenever your character is not balanced, all right, you disconnect yourself from your Ori's guidance and protection in that moment. So when you're doing something that you know you're not supposed to be doing, then you disconnect from that power that is meant to guard you and keep you like on course or what have you. All right. What is the connection between Iwapele and your destiny? All right. So walking in balanced character does not change your destiny. Understand that. It absolutely helps you to fulfill your destiny. It clears that path so that you can remove a lot of the negative experiences and the challenges and so forth so you can get to the next stage of your destiny. But it's not going to change it. It's not like, well, if I do everything perfectly and right, I am going to get, fill in the blank, whatever wish that I desire. If that wish isn't part of your divine purpose from the start, it's not going to change that reality. Okay. Obviously, imbalanced character is going to create obstacles for you that are going to block your blessings from coming your way for you to fulfill your destiny. This is so important because people don't understand this all the time. When you're in imbalance, and you're operating in a space where you're causing situations to go against you or not work in your favor, you are throwing off the course of the things that you're meant to have. So let's say, for instance, you work somewhere, you're at work and you have a really bad attitude with your supervisor and your colleagues or whoever is around you, right? And you're actually meant to have promotions in that particular space. Even so, you may be meant to, like, at some point own that space or a similar space to it, but your attitude is bad. You treat everybody unkind, you're rude, you're mean, and so forth and so on, right? And so that's not going to get you favor in that instance from your supervisors and your coworkers, and it probably will lead to you being fired. If not fired, you're going to stay in a lowly position for a prolonged period of time until you straighten up your character. And therein, you may have supposed to be in a completely different space a long time ago, right? You're supposed to have had that large promotion or a big promotion, or you were supposed to even have started your own business by now, and even that's what you want. But your attitude is not in a good space. So your aura is not allowing you to get to that next step in your destined path because you don't have the character even to sustain it. Because you were to get your own business in that instance and you don't know how to treat people, you're just gonna mess that up. Or even so it could be a situation where, you're supposed to network with somebody who is going to lead you to a higher position, either in that company or a different company. But you never got into a space where you could meet those particular people so that you can climb that ladder because of your attitude. I hope that makes sense to you guys. All right. When your character is balanced and in order, it is going to align you with the timely manifestation of the blessings that you were meant to have in order to fulfill your destiny, whatever that looks like for you in particular. All right. I was asked beforehand, can someone have a difficult destiny but improve the outcomes through Ìwà Pẹ? Absolutely. Absolutely. So there are some people, you come into life and your destiny is wonky and shaky, especially if you're not practicing the tradition that allows you to understand how to get back in balance. You might deal with some things, a lot of things before you even get to that point. But if you're operating in balanced character just by default without even understanding these principles, it can absolutely help you to attract the right support and open the right doors and invite in divine intervention. And I've seen that in a number of cases of people that I worked with, fortunately, through the IFA tradition, where they still had so many blessings on their life because they were operating in balance just naturally, and they finally found their way through IFA, even though they had experienced some really austere situations, but they were led to IFA because they were pretty much in balance throughout. Why is character considered the only thing that follows you after death? Follows us after death, right? So your Iwa, that's your spiritual currency. Transitions with you, goes to the ancestral realm. That's pretty much how you pay your way through to get to where you need to be elevated when you do transition to a room. So it is going to determine, how you are remembered in this earth. If you have a beautiful legacy behind you, you're going to have people that want to honor you, that constantly are honoring you, either through like the traditional mechanisms of sacrifices and offerings or through the words that they speak, because that uplifts our ancestors too. When we speak kindly of them, when we're constantly, keeping their memory in rotation. Honestly, a lot of those things that you see people doing, that they have like I talked about this before, like in hospitals or even these huge buildings or what have you, they dedicate these to their ancestors and the people behind them. That's a way of venerating your ancestors and keeping their name and their memory alive, guys. And so when you have balanced character, you're gonna have people always talking about what you did. This particular ancestor did this and they made a way for our family to go to this space or that space. It's not that they won't necessarily talk about you if you did not have balanced character, but they obviously will talk about that aspect of you. Like, oh, this person was mean, they were horrible, they were cruel, they were rude to people, etc. So that is not the ideal legacy to leave behind. Can aspects of a person's character be inherited from their ancestors? Is another question that I got. Absolutely, right? So certain habits, attitudes, ways of responding to life can and do oftentimes repeat across generations within the same lineage. And it's not even just about, nurture, as they say, right? Because sometimes people will say, well, it's just because you were born in that family, and obviously, all these things are going to come through the lineage. A lot of times you'll see stuff happening in people's lives that occur through generational things that they may have not even experienced. You even see this with people who are adopted, never even connected with their biological bloodline, right? And they will exhibit certain traits or have certain similar experiences as their bloodline, even though they were never raised around, and they could have been raised by people who were completely different, very much so opposite than their bloodline, but those traits will still come forward because those dynamics are inherited. Why? Because there are certain lessons that we have to learn and certain things that we must fulfill according to our bloodline. Just like you have your own ori or destiny, you have your ancestral ori too, that all of your bloodline, your family lineage is connected to. So you have a shared purpose within that dynamic along with your own individual purpose. It's just like, the way you operate in day-to-day life, right? You probably have multiple roles. You definitely are going to be the child of someone. You are going to be you may have siblings depending on your situation. You may be married, you may have children of your own. You may work, right? But you are still yourself, but you have obligations to all of those individuals and entities in your day-to-day life. So you're still connected to that. And that's the same way it goes when we're talking about our ancestral obligations. um, if character traits, which was a follow up question to the first one, if character traits are inherited, can they be changed? Absolutely. So you're not relegated to doing what your ancestors did. If you came from a lineage that did not do so great of things, you're not, first of all, it's not necessarily that it will automatically hit you. It is going to hit some people. Sometimes it skips generations. It just depends on the scenario. But even if it does hit you, you can still come out of that through your conscious diligent efforts and saying, I don't want this for my destiny and I don't want this for my legacy. And you can do things to overcome that. You don't have to repeat negative or adverse patterns from your bloodline. Obviously you want to repeat the positive ones because that's going to help to perpetuate your lineage. All right. Another question that I received is, someone has poor character. Do the Orisha hold back their blessing? Right. So oftentimes the Orisha will still present the blessings to you, even if your character is imbalanced. This is usually going to be the case if they, have those basic obligations to fulfill, because there are certain things that Orishas are they have to do for us, irrespective of whether we are even so giving offerings and doing the sacrifices and things like that. There are just certain things that are going to be part of your destiny. The ritual work is meant to balance things out, to remove those obstacles, and to allow you to full on fulfill your destiny. But you still have certain aspects of it. Even without that, you're gonna breathe, right? You're still gonna have air. You're gonna have food. It may not be the food that you like. You're gonna have hopefully have shelter if you are surviving in this world. So certain things are going to happen irrespective of whether you are imbalanced or not. Doesn't mean it is going to be perfect or ideal, but it still will be there, even if you don't have balanced character. Also, obviously, if you fulfill your ebo, the original will come and bring the blessings through. They're not the ones to worry about. What's the concern is Ori, right? So the blessings could come, be on their way, or he could say, nope, you're not getting this, or he could delay those blessings from coming to you, or distort or disrupt those blessings to the point where you get them, you are not able to enjoy them fully, or they don't serve fully in the capacity that they were meant to serve for your life. So you got to keep that in mind as well. Now, obviously, we're going to transition into the ritual work, the spiritual power that enables you to walk in balance. So, obviously, the title being, Ìwà Pẹ versus the ritual work, is Ìwà Pẹ more important than sacrifice? And obviously, it is, after everything we just talked about. Ìwà Pẹ is the foundation that even so makes your sacrifice to be as effective as it should be. Doesn't mean that you could, if you're out of balance, you do elbow and You know, I should actually say the opposite. If you do your elbow and then you're walking out of balance after that, that you won't see any gains from the elbow, because you absolutely can and probably will if it was done properly. But again, those blessings could be distorted or delayed, or just, not in the position that you really wanted them. They could come, the blessings could come and still actually look like curses to you if they come in the wrong position. For instance, you get like some financial blessings could come through, and as soon as you get them, you get robbed, right? And like the blessing came, but it didn't come in a position that allowed you to enjoy it. And even so, it could actually destroy you, because it could be a fatal robbery. Somebody come and do something to you or harm you in such a way that maybe become paralyzed or something, right? Comatose, and like you just in the earth, and those things were taken from you. You got the blessing, the money came, but you weren't able to keep it. So that's why you want to be very, very careful when it comes to that notion of walking in balance. You don't just depend on the elbow, and that is the source of confusion a lot of times when people come to Ifa, because they've been told, you go, you get all of these beautiful things, you get these miracles, and the magic and so forth and so on. And Ifa is very effective, and it can bring forth some things really quickly. Okay, but of course, it's according to your destiny as well. If it's coming like on a timeline from a space of you compelling it or forcing it to come, you're likely not working with authentic, Ishe practice, probably doing some other things. But either way, the principles are the principles and they can work. But the question is, are you keeping it? Or are you able to really maintain those blessings that come through? All right. So let's see. Your offerings definitely don't replace your character. You still have to walk in good character. And like I said, that's a blind spot that sometimes people have. Like, I can just come to the tradition, do whatever I want to do some ritual work, and my life is going to be good. That's not what the tradition is about. It's never been about that. Unfortunately, that's the way people have tried to make it be. People have demonized it to say that's what's going on, and we just sacrificing animals and forcing things to be, and we're dealing with black magic and things like that. And that is just not true. Okay. Um, let's see. And another thing about offerings to Ebo, obviously they can't replace your character, but they can balance it out, and that's the beautiful thing about it. So this is not all about condemning, when you are out of balance. Ebo is also meant to help you correct your character when you're out of balance. If you're dealing with some challenges, especially generational stuff, right, or some things that may have came about because of situations you went through in the past, and you want to correct that behavior, Ebo is very, very beneficial in doing that, in killing off those, generational curses and stopping certain behaviors from, just repeating over and over again in your life, right? Can someone with poor character still receive blessings from Ifa? That was another question similar to the Orisha question. So, in Orunmila being in Orisha as well, but I think the position of the question was more so from Ifa as the traditional system. So absolutely, right? You can still receive the blessings, however, you may not be able to maintain them, or they could come with challenges, as I said before. Can Iwa Pele protect someone from negative forces? It absolutely can. It is a very potent form of spiritual protection, okay? Balanced character can make you less vulnerable to spiritual attacks because you don't have that gate open from your character being out of whack. You can close up a lot of doors when you get into a space of balance. All right. That being said, it is like, not 100% fail proof, foolproof, or what have you. No one is ever perfectly balanced. So you could be balanced in one aspect of life and still have some challenges in another aspect of life. that could be creating a doorway for evil forces to come about. Even so, there is some very, very potent spiritual work that people can do that can cause you problems. Nobody is 100% secure, even with, walking in Ìwà Pẹ, even with like doing all of the spiritual work. But there are people who are like 95 to 99% highly protected through those devices alone, like walking in balanced character, or even so like doing the spiritual work. But there are situations where people can still operate at a higher level. That's why you want to always work to stay focused, balancing your own character out, and then also doing the ritual work and your obligations, your spiritual obligations. Temperament and conflict. So, does Ìwà Pẹ mean that you should avoid conflict? Absolutely not. Ìwà Pẹ does not mean like you just run anytime there's a conflict or a challenge, like you don't face a person that's causing you some kind of problems or like in life, like you just got to, fall back or what have you. It means engaging in conflict in alignment with your aura. Okay. So that means that, sometimes that means, rather, that you need to actually stand firm in your position, and you do need to fight. And when I say fight, I'm not saying like from a negative or adverse position, but just standing your ground. You still remain composed and fight in that way. Not necessarily physical battle is what I mean. Sometimes you might have to do that too. Sometimes it absolutely comes to that, right? Again, it depends on your individual destiny, because some people, they came into this life to learn how to fight back because they don't know how to stand up for themselves. So they have to learn that lesson, but still learn it from a space that's in alignment with their aura. That doesn't mean that you have to, like be physically violent with someone in order to fight back. Obviously, that can also come in a position where you need to know when to fall back, when to say, you know what, I don't need to engage in this type of battle at this particular moment in this experience, based on what you're going through in that moment. So sometimes you do need to avoid conflict. Again, you need to understand your destiny for that. And I smile because I'm, yeah, most of the time on the opposite end of that. Like I need to know when to fall back because of, my head of Risha being Ogun. So there's a lot of lessons for me in that aspect. That being said, there are children of Ogun who are very docile. They are operating on the opposite end of their energy. And Ogun is a very supposed to be diplomatic, right? He's God of war. And so, industry and advancement, motivation, etc. So you're actually supposed to be in a space where you are operating in diplomacy, which means compromise a lot of times. But you can be out of balance in any regard with any Orisha. I'm going to get to that shortly as well, as far as the role that the Orishas play in us maintaining balanced character. So it's about knowing what to do according to your own destined path. Um, does walking in Ìwà Pẹ mean that you cannot defend yourself? Absolutely not. Right? It does not require you to just be passive or docile or defenseless. Somebody just walking up to you, the Bible, somebody smack you on the cheek, turn the other cheek towards them to give it to them too. No, that's not what Ìwà Pẹ is. Again, it's about balance. Sometimes it requires you to stand up for yourself. Sometimes it requires you to actually engage in physical battle, depending on the circumstances that you are dealing with. You have to, it's going to come each time. This is why, each time you go through anything throughout your day, this is why it's so important to stay close to the tradition and understanding insight from Ifa and what's going to happen. It may be like you get a reading and it does tell you like you're about to experience some conflict. You should not fight with anybody at this time. That can come up in your reading. or it could be you're about to deal with some challenges and you do not need to let people take advantage of you at this time. So many different scenarios can come out. So once you know what's ahead, you know how to protect yourself, you know how to operate in balance in those situations. All right. But definitely you can and should protect yourself. You should set boundaries when appropriate. You should respond to threats without losing your composure. And that's the key to balance. Again, maybe a situation where you still have to fight if somebody's fighting you. It's not like Ifa said, you just stand there and let somebody beat you. That's no, that's not the way it works either. Okay. How do you rather maintain Iwa Pele when someone is actively disrespecting you? Is another question that I received. So you want to try your best to avoid overly emotional reactions. Overly emotional is just not balanced either way it goes. It doesn't mean, again, that you won't have to, engage in physical combat depending on the situation, because it may just be that somebody's like coming to do something to you. It's not about just standing there and not trying to defend yourself. But you do want to try your best to address any type of disrespect directly while walking in balance, keeping your taboos in mind. Sometimes maintaining Iwa Pele means walking away or avoiding that conflict, like I said earlier. Other times it means standing up for yourself or others, depending on the scenario that you're dealing with. Another question, can you have Iwa Pele and still make mistakes? Absolutely. Because Iwa Pele is not about being perfect. We are never going to be perfect in this existence. And that's not what Ifa teaches. Ifa teaches balance. All right. And so, you're going to make mistakes. That's just life. So don't beat yourself up. Even when you do the ritual work and you're trying your best to live the best life that you possibly can, you'll make mistakes. That's why we have things like the ritual work, the crochet, to bring us back into balance, into harmony with our destiny, right? Iwapele is more so about how you handle yourself, how you take accountability, how you course correct when you fall short. So as soon as you recognize it, get back on, your high horse, so to speak, and try to make amends for what you've done. That doesn't mean stay in that energy. You want to course correct as soon as possible. Um, when you make mistakes, right, you want to learn from them. That's part of balanced character, when you learn from the mistakes that you make. Someone also asked, are we always being tested on our character? So obviously life is constantly presenting us with like different scenarios that can cause us challenges, that can change our lives, that can change our trajectory and do all kinds of things. However, these situations are not from a space of like a formal test to judge you or condemn you, or like you going to hell if you don't pass this test. That's not what they are meant for. Instead, they are meant to teach us vital lessons, even when they come from negative or evil forces, and to help us to consistently refine our character. Another question that I received was, when people disagree, does that reflect the character of one person or the other person, or neither of the two? So disagreeing with somebody in and of itself doesn't really have anything to do with their character. It's not revealing your character. People are going to disagree. That's part of life. It's natural and normal and necessary, even so, in some cases. That being said, the way you respond to that disagreement is what shows your character, right? You can agree to disagree with people. If you have any type of relationship in this earth, you are going to disagree with those people sometimes. Some people you may disagree with more than others. There may be a telltale sign that you may not need to be around that person too much, depending on the scope of the relationship and your ability to not be around that person, right? But like, for instance, if you're in a romantic relationship and you're constantly arguing with your person, you might want to check that out. to see if you guys are actually meant to be together, and if it is, if you are meant to be with that person, if that's like a suitable mate for you, therein you need to figure out what you need to do in order for you to find balance or achieve balance in that connection. But it may be a situation where you're just not aligned with that person properly, and you two really don't even need to be together, right? But even in the best of connections and relationships, like, are you do you get angry? Do you get frustrated? Or do you start to lay hands on somebody when you disagree with them? That's what determines your character in that situation. Now we're going to look at a few Odu and mythological correlations when it comes to Iwa Pele or balanced character. So somebody asked, why is Iwa considered the spouse of Orunmila? Orunmila being Ifa as well, oftentimes referred to, I should say. So Iwa is Orunmila's companion because wisdom and enlightenment without character are incomplete. Orunmila brings us enlightenment. That's the insight that you get when you get an Ifa reading. That's, you consult the Babalawo rather, or Iyanifa, consulting with Ifa or Orunmila about your destined path, what you're meant to do. And they're going to bring you insight from that reading, right? But you still have to operate with balanced character in order to carry that out. It means nothing if you don't embody those principles of alignment. If somebody comes and tells you, they give you some taboos or some warnings or some things that you shouldn't do at that time, but you don't care, you just want whatever you want at that time, then it's pointless. So this is why Orunmila spouse, Eva is considered the spouse of Orunmila because it is a marriage between the two that is going to bring successful or productive outcomes into your life. Another one was, what is the difference between Iwa Pele and Iwa Tutu? Iwa Pele, as we talked about, is the gentle or the balanced character. Iwa Tutu, means cool or calm character. It basically emphasizes you being composed or emotionally restrained. All right. Both of these connect to what we call aligned character, obviously, but Iwa Tule focus Tutu. Why I keep saying the wrong thing. Iwa Tutu focuses more on your temperament, right? Which is just one of the many aspects of balanced character. So you can you have so many dimensions of being in balance, and you could have a cool temperament. You don't have to have a cool temperament even so to be in balance all the time, I should say, right? And when I say cool, like, that doesn't mean that you just have to be chilled and not say something. There are times even so where having a heated temperament is very important, especially when it comes to like dealing with things related to righteous indignation. You should be angry about certain things in life, injustices and so forth and so on. Another question is, how do the Orishas relate to Iwa Pele? So each and every Orisha, has their domain of authority. They operate on a spectrum, as I talk about all the time. In the middle is the balanced aspect of their character, but they can operate on either extreme. It's not just that one aspect that a lot of people like to focus on. They love to focus on the good aspect and not really look at that sliding scale, right? So there are many, every Orisha has like their mythological narratives, several of them, not even just one, several mythological narratives that will recount situations that showed character flaws. And in that, it necessitated that they course correct. And through that course correction, they're teaching you different lessons about who they are and how you should operate, especially if that's your head or research. It gives you a whole lot of information, okay, about different lessons. And whenever they do go through that, you always notice that they will transition. Sometimes they, actually die, right? They might fall on the sword and die, or they might just, go into the ground or something like that. Or they might transition into another form, like, Oshun transition into, this beautiful river or what have you. But there are aspects of an Orisha's character that you need to pay attention to, especially if it's your head Orisha, that can teach you a lot about yourself and how to operate within balanced character. So using that example of Oshun, a lot of people love to focus on just, the love and all of the good things that she brings, the money, the prosperity, or what have you. Well, yes, when you're operating from a space of practical prosperity, so you have the money, you have the abundance, the finances that you want, but you're practical with them. You are investing, you are enjoying. Not to say you can't enjoy, because Ocean is about pleasure, but not overindulgence, because that's too far on one end. You just overindulgence, you just having fun. You're not saving anything up. You're not considering your future or anything like that. And even so, sometimes maybe overdoing it. You're spending more than what you have. Another part of that would be on the opposite end, where you're too frugal. You're what they call a spendthrift or something like that, where you're not utilizing any of your money to enjoy yourself or even to allow other people to enjoy your money. You just are hoarding money. You might have millions of dollars in the bank and not ever enjoy life, or your family may not be able to enjoy any of the finer things in life, even though you have that at your disposal, right? And so the goal is to be somewhere in the middle. That's just the reality of it. Right? Even with her notion of love, you want a balanced love connection with whomever, your family, romantic connections, etc. Jealousy is the extreme end of her love. And then two, you can also just overlove somebody to the point where you suffocate them. Just always there. You never let them go. You never let them do anything because you're afraid of losing them. You just want to hold on so tight to them. And every Orisha has their narrative in that regard. I talked about Ogun. Ogun being you know, in balance. We want to be diplomatic. All right. Um, the opposite end of that is just extreme aggression, always wanting to fight and things like that. And on the other side of that is, apathy, not wanting to do anything, letting people just, you know, take advantage of you, hit you, abuse you, and you just don't do anything. Right? You turn the other cheek all the time, as the saying goes. So you want to be careful with all of that, and that's for every Orisha. So if you know your head Orisha, go and do some of those studies and understand every aspect of that Orisha, so that you understand where to fall in balance when it comes to that. All right. So, the notion that those stories gives us the understanding of when they mess up, what they do to course correct. And that's all about, releasing the old ways, okay? Renewing yourself and then elevating to the next level, transitioning into the next phase of you. It's not about condemnation, right? Because they're showing you those narratives, those mythological stories show you that you are human, that you are going to have challenges and you are going to make mistakes. You don't want to try to be too perfect to the point where you get self-righteous, or you so perfect that you beat yourself up every time you make one small mistake, because that's going to happen. Let's see. So, let's see. Did you have a question about Iwa Tutu? Because, yeah, I was discussing that before. I don't know if you have a question about it. Alafia, alien black girl. Greetings to everybody who is coming in. I'm actually about to close up shortly. So if you guys have any questions, you were really, really quiet today. If you have any more questions, or any questions, I should say, comments are concerned, definitely let me know, because we'll be closing up probably within the next 10 to 15 minutes if you do. So, understand, guys, Ìwà Pẹ, this is not a destination, right? It's not just you get here, you balance, and everything is perfect and nothing's ever going to change, right? This is a daily practice of aligning yourself to your destiny, which is for your highest good. All right, aligning yourself with the principles of the divine. Okay, in order to do that, you want to pay attention to yourself, observe yourself, your responses. How do you navigate change? How do you navigate conflict or challenges in your life? And when I say change, for the good or the bad, right? So, change, even though it's a good change, you could be moving somewhere to a bigger, better house, you could be getting more pay and so forth and so on. It still comes with a level of challenges. How do you navigate that? Do you run around telling everybody, oh, I just got this huge promotion? Because you got to be careful again in your speech. And, you talking to people. For some people, it could be a taboo for you to tell everything. You're not supposed to tell everybody everything, but you might run out there and tell everybody everything, and then therein you mess up your own blessings. So you want to be careful with those dynamics as well. You want to continuously cultivate discipline as you honor your taboos, as you honor warnings. When you get IFA readings and you get insight, and it tells you, you know, don't do this or try not to do this, right? You want to try your best to honor that with respect, with humility and integrity, etc. So be mindful of those realities as well. Alafia Benjamin, we about to close out. So thank you for joining us. Um, so, guys, if you do need deeper insight or wisdom, definitely check us out. Asanee44.com. You're looking to make some transformation and explore more about living in alignment with Ifa wisdom. We have so many resources there on the website to help you do so. So, the next live stream that I have planned to, oh yes, so March the 23rd, I was making sure the date was right. March the 23rd, I do want to talk about the purpose of initiation, because I've been getting some feedback from you guys about different things related to initiation. We have the live streams online, of course, that we did before, about like the process itself, cost, and all of that. So, definitely check those out. But this one is more so about the purpose, why we do it. I want to get more in depth with that. So, with that being said, that is all I have for you today. Thank you all for joining us. Ashe, please have a very blessed and beautiful day and beyond, guys.